Hey everyone, thanks for watching this series. This is the last part. I appreciate you guys supporting what we do. This is such a crazy build for us. We'll start off this episode with brakes. I actually reached out to Stoptech because I run Stoptech brakes on my 240Z, and my really good friend Rob from Z Car Garage developed brakes specifically for the 240Z chassis that's small and also that works well with a stock master cylinder. On top of that, he developed something that actually replaces the drum brakes in the rear of the 240Z, but with all this fluid dynamic calculations and all this stuff, whatever, they were actually able to get it to work where it's very good proportion to the front. The problem with the 240Z that we've seen many times, including the kits that I've ran before, where I ran like Toyota 4x4 brakes in the front and Nissan Maxima brakes in the rear, the fluid, it just was not proportional to what the car needed. So I would always lock up fronts or rears or whatever. There was always something funky going on. So I figured if Stoptech can develop something to perform and be reliable and it also looks amazing, I figured, you know what? I'll reach out to them for this project because I wanted something premium. You know, it is going in the Toyota booth at the SEMA show, so I figured it needs to look its best. For most drift cars, the brakes aren't that big of a deal. The main thing is that you have to make sure it can lock the rears when you're using hydraulic e-brake or whatever the stock handbrake. The brakes that Stoptech actually installed on this vehicle are the exact same brakes that Jonathan Castro runs on his GR86 Formula Drift car. The difference, of course, is he's running a dual caliper setup in the rear because they actually don't need a parking brake. Because this is known as the Toyota GR86 Daily Drifter street legal drift car, it actually needs a parking brake still. So at the time, nobody actually made a kit to keep the parking brake and have a dual caliper setup. So we went with a single caliper setup, which is just an inline hydro setup that my friend Jason Kim at Rival Auto Works figured out. But it works perfect with the Stoptech brakes, and I just couldn't believe it. The Stoptech guys actually came over to my shop. Initially, I was going to bring the GR86 to them so they can install it, but they came over and man, was it a good time. They're great guys. David, I've known the guy for many, many years in the drift scene. When I started in the drift scene, he was there. And since then, he's worked quite a bit for Stoptech, developing so many kits, including this kit for the FRS, GT86, BRZ, and GR86. Up until this point, they've never actually fit this kit on a street vehicle. So that's part of the reason why they actually wanted to get their hands on it, and they wanted to make sure it fit perfectly. The kit itself is the race kit, and it has a different finish than the street version. It actually also comes with the race pads. The fronts are two-piece rotors, they're nickel-plated, and the rears are just single-piece. The kit itself is called the STR40. The fronts are two-piece drilled nickel-plated rotors, and the rear is a C42 Touring 4-piston kit that also comes with drill rotors, but they're single-piece because they retain the e-brake. The rear calipers are actually something that a lot of people run on their fronts when you actually have a smaller wheel setup. So it's definitely cool to see the versatility of these calipers. The fronts were pretty much the biggest brakes I could actually fit under 17-inch wheels. I mentioned in an earlier episode that I wanted to run 17 because I figured it wouldn't make the most power, so it would be a little harder to turn 18-inch wheels. Plus, I feel like I love that look where it's just a meaty tire versus something just like a thin rubber band. So I wanted to go with 17-inch. So these front calipers are honestly the biggest you can go without going to a bigger wheel. I actually reached out to GR Japan and they connected me with their TCD department, which is the Toyota Customization and Development Division. They make performance cars with OEM fitment for the Japanese market. And what's interesting is they developed a lot of these parts. Now the US is starting to get these. Like for example, the short shifter that we have on here is a GR Japan part. And now you can actually buy them in the US at dealerships. I asked for a couple things and they actually were able to provide 4 things that we put on this car. We have the GR short shifter, we have the GR door striker kit, which actually allows for the doors to not move at all under hard cornering and when the chassis flexes. Basically, it's just a way tighter fit than the stock door striker. We also put on the most JDM thing, I think, on the car, which are the window visors. You can see them on most Japanese cars because in Japan, when they're driving in the rain, they want to roll down their window a little bit to ash their cigarette. That way you can drive around with windows down and basically the car won't get wet inside. The last thing that they sent over is the underbody bracing set, which is super premium. It replaces a lot of the stamped steel underneath the car that is structural support for the subframe, for a bunch of different parts of the car. But the thing is, it also includes some really trick pieces, including this brace that actually supports the steering rack. For whatever reason, they probably saw some kind of flex under hard cornering and they figured, hey, this is a good time to develop something for people who actually want to take their cars to the track. It also came with a brace that ties in the rear end that goes behind the crash support. These parts have no reason to look so good. They are red and they are so finished. The problem is you can't actually see any of it really because the under tray covers most of it. You can see it a little bit, but it's really cool knowing that they developed something that looks good, but mostly performs. Because a lot of the Aero bits that we got from HKS were from their BRZ, pretty much everything fit except for the front lip. So HKS actually overnighted parts from Japan to my shop so we can get the correct lip on there. Because we put on all the Aero bits after Gino already wrapped the car, we actually needed to take it back to VaderWorks for him to complete the wrap and actually incorporate the side skirts, incorporate the lip, basically incorporate the entire kit to the livery. And we also needed to reposition a lot of the sponsor decals, which honestly, I think set off the look of the vehicle. Other HKS goodies that I forgot to mention in the last episode included the HKS dry carbon engine cover and also the fuse box cover. It doesn't make any sense why it is dry carbon and why it has to be so lightweight, but it's just so cool that they went out of their way to make some really premium dress-up parts, and it really just yells at you, HKS. As soon as you pop the hood, you can tell there's something special going on with this motor because of that HKS engine cover. After all said and done, I honestly thought we were at the finish line and we're done with the build. That's when SPL Parts reached out to me and they said, hey, we see you're building a GR86. Would you like to try our suspension components on your vehicle? I could not have said yes faster. SPL Parts is such a legacy brand, a legacy tuning brand in the US. They've been developing really amazing suspension components for Nissans for so many years, and they actually started branching out to other manufacturers. I think it's perfect for them to develop something for this platform because of the fact that it's so good for the casual tuner, casual HPD, autocross, drifter. The fact that all of these suspension components that they sent over will fit on the FRS, BRZ, GT86, all of them. It's really just cool that they're developing something for a new chassis. With that said, it also really set off the car in terms of the capabilities. I was thinking that it would just be something that we could use for the drift track and then the occasional track day use, because we can't really dial in the alignment perfectly for maximum contact patch and all of that stuff. But now after we put SPL parts on it, we're able to dial in the toe, the camber, caster, every single aspect of the suspension exactly how we want it. And on top of that, the byproduct was that it sits perfectly flush. Like, oh my God, it cannot be any more flush. We did have to run a 10 mil spacer in the front just because we need a little more steering angle. If we were able to push the SPL arms out all the way and we push the top hat on the SD coilovers all the way out, we were actually worried that it wouldn't have as much steering angle because it would extend the tie rod too much. But with that said, it sits perfect. SPL is one of those companies that I was actually kind of afraid to reach out to because I've always followed what they've done and I've always absolutely loved their parts, but it's just so premium. They're made in the US and they are made to last and go fast. And the adjustability is unbelievable. The finish is incredible. They're just art pieces. They also sent over their subframe bushing kit, but unfortunately, due to our time constraints, we're unable to put them on before the show, but you can bet as soon as we get it back from the show, we'll put them on and I'm sure it'll really tighten up that rear end. The last part that we decided to tackle was the diff. I actually bought an OS Geigen for my 350Z because I know that's the best diff that you can run for street and track use. There's so many diffs that you can put on the car, but it's gonna be clunking, it's gonna be noisy, it's gonna be really hard to drive on the street. And of course, if you weld the diff, it's even worse. I wanted to go with OS because I wanted to build a premium car that I can drive on the street and on the track. So I figured it would be the same deal with the GR86. I wanted to keep that street ability, but I also wanted it to go fast and drift well. So I reached out to OS and I told them I wanted to buy their diff. They insisted to sponsor the diff, which I really appreciate. And it is such an honor to be able to work with OS. So they actually sent over a very aggressive 1.5 way, which will allow me to drift and it'll allow it to lock right away, but also it'll be good for going fast on the track. After all said and done, I didn't intend for this car to have all of these premium parts. I didn't intend for the cost to almost reach $80,000, including the price of the car. But for whatever reason, it worked out that way. Car culture is alive and well, very strong, and it's incredible to see all these companies and all these people come together to help with this project. The thing is, when I build cars, they're not just for the show, or they're not just for the YouTube episodes. They're always long-term, and I'm going to use this for many years to come. You're gonna see me at the track, you're gonna see me at drift events, you're gonna see me at Grid Life, and I'm actually gonna be using it. The last bit of parts that we actually put on the car were just the final touches. We did a Vivid Racing VR bespoke steering wheel. We actually wanted to go with a steering wheel that's still street legal, that still retains the airbag, but actually looks really good and is functional because of the fact that we wanted it to be street legal. It's a fine line. Once you actually go with a steering wheel without an airbag, it's pretty dangerous to drive on the street. The steering wheel that they sent is really nice. It actually comes with perforated leather. It also has really neat stitching that comes with the TRD colors. It's orange, yellow, and red. And there's a really cool top dead center stripe that actually is part of the stitching. One of the things I hated so much about my Tundra was the stock steering wheel. It actually looks like it was a one-piece plastic mold, and it was just so cheap. It felt like a toy, and it was so uncomfortable to drive with. VR Bespoke actually makes this awesome steering wheel that's way more premium and that actually fit the rest of my build. So when I built this GR86, I knew I had to reach out to them to get a similar quality steering wheel. The last two touch-up bits that really set off the car were the racing front and rear tow hooks. The front tow hook is so neat. It actually has a place to mount a GoPro. They are a US company and they make such premium and good looking products, and they're also functional. So I'm definitely proud to rep them on this car. Last but not least, as you can see blaring behind me are the LED lights. Type S has made pretty big waves in the tuning industry. As you guys have seen over the years, you know, underglow was really hot, or maybe never ever hot, when Fast and Furious first came out all those years ago. And then of course it was pretty cheesy to have underglow on your car. But now I think the drifting crowd, I think the show crowd has really taken it upon themselves to make it pretty classy. You know, it looks so cool when you're making tire smoke at night and then the LED lights are lighting up the tire smoke, and it's just kind of a fun, festive way to celebrate a car when they're making tire smoke, drifting, or if you're just parked in a parking lot at a meet and you want it to look a different way or have some kind of accented lights. It's just so cool. So we put the Type S Pro LED kit on this car. It's really neat. You can actually control it with your phone, but this is the exact same kit that they run on all the Formula Drift cars when they drift at night. Before the show, I really wanted to test the car out, and I guess it's kind of a flex to be able to drift your car and actually show that it works before the show. I understand that it's not so crazy in that we didn't do a motor swap, drivetrain swap, we didn't do a wide body. You know, we know SEMA is the over fender nationals, and I wasn't part of that this year. But to me, it's something that I'm super proud of, and I'm just so happy to be able to display this in the Toyota booth. But with that said, I am a photographer and I am a storyteller, so I wanted to get some assets and content of this vehicle before we actually took it to the show. So we took it out to Apple Valley Speedway. My friend Calvin actually owns that track, and he let us shred, and I put this car through its paces. You know, we did standing burnouts. I linked a lot of the course. There's some corners that I kind of stayed away from because I knew if I pushed it too hard, I would go off. But it worked great. I did a couple grip laps. I did a couple drift laps. And man, was it just such a fun time. It was just such a relief to see that all of our hard work really paid off. And it was just so much fun to hang out with friends. I actually did bring out my 350Z to get some laps in, and you know, I went off a couple times, and it was just kind of fun to get back into the driver's seat. I don't get to drive that much, and you know, after photographing drifting for so many years, I figured this was the perfect time to get into this hobby, and I'm just bummed that I didn't do it earlier, but I'm glad I'm doing it now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this build series. We're definitely gonna do more, and I feel like the whole adding of the price thing, I'll probably do that on a couple more of my cars because I think it's kind of interesting to see what things would cost real world. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you guys later. Boom, series done.
Series done.